I overheard my wife call me pathetic in bed to her sister, so I withdrew, reclaimed my self-respect, and walked away from a marriage built on lies. She was on the phone with her sister, and something in her tone made me pause. The conversation started innocently enough, typical sister talk about weekend plans and family gossip. But then her voice dropped to that conspiratorial whisper women use when they think no one else is listening. You want to know the truth? He is pathetic in bed. Completely pathetic. The glass nearly slipped from my hand. I stood frozen, my entire body going cold as her words sank in. This was not some casual complaint about a bad day or a minor annoyance. This was my wife, the woman I had been married to for 6 years, discussing our most intimate moments, like she was reviewing a disappointing movie. I mean, I have tried everything, she continued, her voice getting more animated. Hints, suggestions, even bought some books and left them where he could see them. Nothing works. It is like he does not even care if I am enjoying myself. I felt my jaw clench. The books. I remembered those books appearing on her nightstand a few months ago. When I had asked about them, she had claimed they were for general relationship improvement. Now I understood they were her passive-aggressive way of telling me I was failing as a husband without having the courage to say it to my face. The worst part is he thinks he is doing great. She laughed, and that sound hit me like a physical blow. He will finish and then ask if it was good for me, and I just lie there and nod. What am I supposed to say? That I have been faking it for 3 years. 3 years. She had been lying to my face for 3 years, every time I had asked if she was satisfied, every time she had smiled and said yes. It had all been an elaborate performance. I had been living in a relationship built on deception, and I had been too trusting to see it. I know I should talk to him about it, she said, her voice taking on a martyr tone. But you know how sensitive men are about these things. He would probably have a breakdown or something. It is easier to just deal with it. Deal with it like I was some burden she had to endure. Like our marriage was a chore she had to complete rather than a partnership she valued. I had spent 6 years trying to be the husband I thought she wanted, working extra hours to provide for us, planning romantic dinners, surprising her with gifts. And this whole time, she had been treating me like I was some incompetent fool who could not even satisfy his own wife. Maybe I should find someone who actually knows what they are doing, she said with another laugh. I am kidding, of course, but honestly, sometimes I wonder what it would be like to be with a real man who could actually make me feel something. That was the moment everything changed. Not just my understanding of our marriage, but my entire perception of who I had been in this relationship. I had been playing the role of the devoted husband while she had been playing the role of the satisfied wife, and neither of us had been honest about what we really wanted. I quietly set the glass down and walked back toward the living room, my footsteps silent on the hardwood floor. She was curled up on the couch, her back to me, completely absorbed in her conversation. She had no idea I had heard every word. No idea that her casual cruelty had just destroyed the foundation of our marriage. Anyway, enough about my pathetic husband, she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. What are you wearing to dinner on Saturday? I stood there for a moment, watching her chat happily with her sister, acting like the conversation I had just overheard was nothing more than harmless gossip. But it was not harmless. It was a revelation that showed me exactly how little respect she had for me, how little our marriage actually meant to her. I walked back to the kitchen, my mind surprisingly clear. There was no anger, no immediate urge to confront her. Instead, I felt something much more powerful, absolute certainty. I knew exactly what I needed to do, and I knew I was not going to waste time with explanations or arguments or attempts to fix something that had been broken for 3 years. When she finished her call 20 minutes later, she found me sitting at the kitchen table, calmly reading the news on my phone. She walked over and kissed the top of my head like she always did, like nothing had changed. "What are you up to?" she asked, her voice warm and affectionate. I looked up at her, this woman who had just spent half an hour mocking me to her sister, and smiled, just thinking about some changes I need to make. She had no idea what those changes would be, but she was about to find out. The next morning, I woke up with the same crystal-clear certainty I had felt the night before. While she was still sleeping, I made my coffee and sat at the kitchen table, planning my next moves. This was not about revenge or causing drama. This was about reclaiming my self-respect and showing her exactly what she was about to lose. I started small. When she came downstairs expecting her usual good morning kiss and coffee already prepared, I simply nodded and continued reading my phone. She paused, clearly expecting something more, but I did not give her the satisfaction of my attention. "You are quiet this morning," she said, pouring her own coffee. Just focused on some things I need to handle, I replied without looking up. For the past 6 years, I had been her personal assistant, anticipating her needs before she even expressed them. I would wake up early to make her breakfast, iron her clothes when she was running late, and constantly check in throughout the day to see how she was feeling. All of that stopped immediately. Throughout the day, I implemented what I called strategic withdrawal. When she texted asking about dinner plans, I responded with, "I will figure something out for myself." When she called during her lunch break, expecting our usual 20-minute chat, I kept the conversation to under 3 minutes, citing work responsibilities. The most telling moment came that evening. For years, I had been the one initiating physical contact, holding her hand while we watched television, rubbing her shoulders when she complained about stress. That night, I sat in the chair across from the couch instead of next to her, maintaining a polite but distant demeanor. "Are you feeling okay?" she asked during a commercial break, her voice carrying the first hint of concern I had heard all day. "Never better," I said, not taking my eyes off the screen. She tried to engage me in conversation about her day, sharing office gossip and complaining about her boss like she always did, but instead of my usual supportive responses and follow-up questions, I gave her the verbal equivalent of a shoulder shrug. Sounds frustrating, I would say, or that is unfortunate, without any real engagement. By the third day, the changes were becoming impossible for her to ignore. I had stopped doing the dozen small things that had made her life easier, from bringing her coffee in bed to handling the grocery shopping. When she mentioned we were out of her favorite yogurt, I simply said, "You should probably pick some up." Then the woman who had spent 3 years faking satisfaction with our marriage was now experiencing what genuine dissatisfaction looked like. And the beautiful thing was she had no idea why it was happening. "You have been acting strange lately," she said on Thursday night, her voice carrying an edge of frustration. "Is there something you want to talk about?" I looked at her for a long moment. This woman who had called me pathetic to her sister while smiling to my face. "Nothing comes to mind," I said. "Is there something you want to talk about?" The question hung in the air between us, loaded with meaning she could not quite grasp. I watched her face carefully, seeing the wheels turning as she tried to figure out what she might have done wrong. The fact that she could not immediately identify her behavior as problematic told me everything I needed to know about her character. "I just feel like you are pulling away from me," she said, attempting to sound vulnerable. "I am right here," I replied, which was technically true while being completely meaningless. That night, she made what I recognized as her first real attempt to get my attention back. She wore the black nightgown she knew I liked, and positioned herself in the bedroom doorway with a look that had always been my signal. I glanced up from my book, gave her a polite smile, and said, "I'm pretty tired tonight. You should probably get some rest, too." The confusion and hurt that flashed across her face was almost satisfying. For 3 years, she had been rejecting me emotionally while pretending everything was fine. Now she was getting a taste of what that felt like, and she clearly did not enjoy the experience. By Friday, she was starting to panic. She had gone from casual concern to active pursuit, trying to recreate the dynamic we had before. But I was not the same man who had been desperate for her approval and affection. I was someone who had heard exactly what she thought of me, and I was responding accordingly. "I was thinking we could go out for dinner tomorrow night," she suggested, her voice overly bright. "That place downtown you like." "I will probably be busy," I said, which was not true but felt appropriate. "Busy with what?" I looked at her with the same detached politeness I had been maintaining all week, just some things I need to take care of. The vagueness was driving her crazy, and I could see her frustration building. She wanted to demand answers, to force me back into the pattern of communication we had before. But something in my demeanor told her that approach would not work anymore. That night, as I lay in bed listening to her restless movements beside me, I realized something important. The man who had been devastated by her words 4 days ago no longer existed. In his place was someone who understood his own worth and was not willing to accept less than he deserved. She had no idea that her casual cruelty had created exactly the kind of man she had claimed to want. Someone who would not beg for her attention or settle for her lies. Someone who knew when to walk away. And I was just getting started. Saturday morning brought the confrontation I had been expecting. She cornered me in the kitchen while I was making breakfast, her arms crossed and her expression determined. The woman who had been coasting on my devotion for 6 years was finally ready to fight for it. "Okay, enough," she said, her voice sharper than I had heard it in months. "Something is obviously wrong, and I am tired of you acting like everything is fine when it clearly is not. I continued buttering my toast, not bothering to look up. I am not sure what you mean. Do not play dumb with me. You have been cold and distant all week. You will not talk to me. You will not touch me. And you are acting like I am some stranger you barely tolerate. The irony was not lost on me. She had been tolerating me for 3 years, lying about her satisfaction while mocking me behind my back. Now she was upset because I had stopped making her deception easy. I have been busy, I said, taking a bite of toast. Work has been demanding. This is not about work. She moved closer, trying to force eye contact. This is about us. About whatever I did to make you act like this. There it was. The assumption that she had done something specific, something she could identify and apologize for. She had no idea that her entire approach to our marriage had been the problem. That years of dishonesty had finally caught up with her. I do not know what you are talking about, I said, my voice perfectly calm. Her frustration was building, and I could see her struggling to maintain control. You know exactly what I am talking about. We used to be close. We used to talk about everything. Now you barely acknowledge I exist. We talk. I said we talked yesterday about the grocery shopping and your meeting with your boss. That is not talking. That is reporting. Her voice was rising now, the careful composure cracking. I am your wife, not your roommate. I deserve better than this. The word deserve hung in the air between us. This woman who had been lying to my face for 3 years, who had called me pathetic to her sister, thought she deserved my attention and affection. The entitlement was breathtaking. What exactly do you think you deserve? I asked, finally looking at her directly. The question caught her off guard. She had expected me to apologize or explain my behavior, not challenge her assumptions. I deserve honesty. I deserve to know what is going on with my husband. Honesty, I repeated, letting the words sit there. Interesting choice. Something in my tone made her pause. I could see her mind working, trying to figure out what I meant. But she was so used to my predictable responses that she could not decode this new version of me. What is that supposed to mean? She asked, her voice quieter now. It means exactly what I said. You want honesty? I find that interesting. She stared at me for a long moment, clearly frustrated by my refusal to engage in the dramatic confrontation she had been building toward. This was not how these conversations usually went. Normally, I would be apologetic and eager to fix whatever was wrong. Fine, she said, switching tactics. If you will not tell me what is wrong, then I will have to guess. Are you unhappy at work? Are you stressed about money? Are you having some kind of midlife crisis? Each question was her way of avoiding the possibility that the problem was her. In her mind, I was the one who needed to be fixed, not her behavior or our relationship dynamic. None of those things, I said. Then what is it? Her voice was almost pleading now. Because this is not like you. You are not the kind of person who shuts down and refuses to communicate. She was right about that. The old me would have been desperate to resolve this tension, to get back to the comfortable familiarity of our routine. But the old me had not known that she had been lying about our most intimate moments for 3 years. Maybe you do not know me as well as you think, I said. That stopped her cold. For the first time in the conversation, she looked genuinely worried rather than just frustrated. The possibility that I might be someone different than she had assumed was clearly terrifying. What is that supposed to mean? She asked again, but this time her voice was smaller. It means people change, situations change, perspectives change. What situation? What perspective? You are talking in riddles. I finished my breakfast and stood up, rinsing my plate in the sink. I am going to run some errands. I will be back later. You are leaving? We are in the middle of a conversation. No, I said, turning to face her. You are in the middle of a conversation. I am finished. The look on her face was a mixture of shock and anger. She was not used to me having the final word, was not used to me walking away when she wanted to keep talking, but that was exactly what I did. As I grabbed my keys and headed for the door, I heard her calling after me. This is ridiculous. You cannot just leave every time things get difficult. I paused at the door and looked back at her. I am not leaving because things are difficult. I am leaving because some conversations are not worth having. The drive gave me time to think about what had just happened. She had pushed for a confrontation, assuming she could force me back into our old pattern. But I refused to play the game, and it had left her more confused and desperate than before. When I returned that evening, she was waiting in the living room with a glass of wine and a carefully composed expression. She had clearly spent the day planning her next approach. I have been thinking about what you said, she began, her voice artificially calm. And I realize I might have been taking you for granted lately. It was a calculated admission designed to make me feel heard while avoiding any real responsibility. She was offering me just enough validation to bring me back into line. "Have you?" I asked, sitting down across from her rather than beside her. "Yes, and I am sorry. I know I have been distracted with work and other things. I have not been the wife you deserve." The word deserve again. She was trying to appeal to my ego, to make me feel like she was finally recognizing my worth, but I had already learned exactly what she thought I deserved. "What kind of wife do you think I deserve?" I asked. She launched into a speech about communication and attention and making more effort. It was everything she thought I wanted to hear, delivered with just the right amount of remorse and promise. I listened without interrupting, watching her perform this carefully crafted apology. When she finished, she looked at me expectantly, waiting for me to accept her offering and return to normal. "That is very thoughtful," I said. "I appreciate you sharing that with me." She waited for more, but I did not give her anything else. The silence stretched between us until she realized I was not going to respond the way she had expected. "So, are we okay?" she asked, her voice uncertain. I looked at her for a long moment, this woman who thought she could manipulate me back into compliance with a few well-chosen words. "We will see," I said, and left her sitting there with her wine and her confusion. Sunday night, she made her boldest move yet. I was reading in bed when she emerged from the bathroom, wearing nothing but a smile and that same black nightgown from earlier in the week. But this time, she was not being subtle about her intentions. "I have been thinking," she said, moving toward the bed with deliberate sensuality. "Maybe we need to reconnect on a more intimate level." I looked up from my book, taking in her performance. A week ago, this approach would have worked instantly. I would have been grateful for her attention, eager to please, desperate to bridge whatever gap had formed between us. But now, I saw it for what it was, manipulation disguised as affection. "That is thoughtful of you," I said, returning to my book. "But I am really absorbed in this chapter." She froze, clearly not expecting that response. In 6 years of marriage, I had never turned down her advances, especially not when she was making such an obvious effort. "The book can wait," she said, her voice taking on a playful tone. She sat on the edge of the bed and placed her hand on my arm. "I cannot remember the last time we really connected. I could remember exactly when we had last been intimate, and according to her sister, it had been another disappointing performance on my part." The thought of going through that charade again, knowing she would be lying about her satisfaction, made my stomach turn. "I am not really in the mood tonight," I said, gently removing her hand from my arm. The rejection hit her like a physical blow. She had clearly expected this gesture to fix whatever was wrong between us, to reset our dynamic back to the way it had been. The fact that it was not working left her visibly shaken. "You are not in the mood," she repeated, as if the concept was foreign to her. "Not tonight." She sat there for a moment, processing this new reality. "Is this about earlier, about our conversation? Because I meant what I said about making more effort." I set my book aside and looked at her directly. "This is not about punishment or making a point. I am simply not interested right now." The word interested clearly stung. She was used to being the one who controlled when and how we were intimate, who decided whether my advances were welcome. Having that dynamic reversed was obviously uncomfortable for her. "We are married," she said, her voice taking on an edge. "Intimacy is part of marriage." "You are absolutely right," I agreed. "Genuine intimacy is essential to a marriage." The emphasis on genuine was not lost on her. I watched her face carefully, looking for any sign that she understood what I was really saying, but she was so focused on getting what she wanted that she missed the deeper meaning. "Then let us be genuine with each other," she said, moving closer again. "Let us stop whatever game this is and just be together." The irony was staggering. This woman who had been lying to me for 3 years was lecturing me about genuine connection. She wanted me to stop playing games while she continued the elaborate deception that our marriage had become. "I do not think you understand what genuine means," I said. That stopped her cold. "What is that supposed to mean?" "It means being honest about what you want and what you are feeling. It means not pretending things are satisfying when they are not. It means having the courage to address problems directly instead of complaining about them to other people." I watched her face change as the implications of my words sank in. She was starting to realize that this conversation was not really about tonight, that there was something bigger happening. "I do not know what you are talking about," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "I think you do." She stood up from the bed, her seductive approach abandoned in favor of defensive positioning. "If you have something to say to me, just say it. Stop talking in riddles and be direct." "I am being as direct as I can be." I am saying that genuine intimacy requires genuine honesty, and I am not sure we have that in our marriage. We have honesty, she said quickly, too quickly. Do we? I asked. When was the last time you told me something that was difficult to say? When was the last time you shared something that might hurt my feelings but needed to be said? She opened her mouth to respond, then closed it again. We both knew the answer. She had never told me anything difficult, because she had been too much of a coward to have real conversations about real problems. Marriage is not always easy, she said, falling back on generic wisdom. Sometimes we have to work through difficult periods. You are right, I said. But working through problems requires acknowledging they exist in the first place. What problems? If there are problems, we can fix them. We can work on whatever needs to be worked on. The desperation in her voice was becoming more obvious. She was offering to fix problems she could not even identify, promising to work on issues she had never been willing to discuss. Some problems cannot be fixed, I said quietly. That is not true. Any problem can be solved if both people are willing to try. I looked at her standing there in her nightgown, still trying to seduce her way out of a conversation she did not want to have. What if one person has been lying for years? What if the entire foundation of the relationship is built on deception? Her face went pale. Who has been lying? What deception? I could have told her then. I could have explained exactly what I had heard and how it had changed everything, but I was not ready for that conversation yet. I wanted her to marinate in the uncertainty a little longer, to experience the anxiety that comes with knowing something is fundamentally wrong, but not being able to fix it. I think you should probably get some sleep, I said, picking up my book again. Tomorrow is going to be a busy day. She stood there for another moment, clearly wanting to push the conversation further, but not knowing how. Finally, she went to her side of the bed and got under the covers. But I could feel her tension radiating across the space between us. This is not over, she said quietly. I looked over at her. This woman who thought she could control the narrative of our marriage through seduction and manipulation. No, I agreed, it is not. But she had no idea how right she was or how much her world was about to change. Monday evening, I made my decision. She had spent the entire day texting me, trying to schedule a dinner conversation to clear the air. Her messages had progressed from hopeful to demanding to almost panicked as I responded with simple, non-committal answers. When I got home, she was waiting in the living room with 2 glasses of wine and her most serious expression. She had clearly rehearsed whatever speech she was planning to give me. We need to talk, she said before I had even set down my keys. All right, I said, sitting down across from her. Let us talk. She launched into a carefully prepared monologue about communication and effort and commitment. She acknowledged that maybe she had been distracted lately. Maybe she had not been as attentive as she should have been. It was a performance designed to preemptively address any complaints I might have. I listened without interrupting, watching her work through her script. When she finished, she looked at me expectantly, waiting for me to accept her olive branch and return to our normal routine. That was very thorough, I said, but you were solving the wrong problem. What do you mean? I leaned back in my chair, studying her face. You are trying to fix things that are not broken while ignoring the thing that is. Then tell me what is broken. Tell me what I need to fix. The moment had arrived. I had spent 1 week preparing for this conversation, planning exactly how to handle it. I was not going to shout or accuse or demand explanations. I was simply going to tell her what I knew and let her deal with the consequences. Last Monday night, you were on the phone with your sister, I began, my voice calm and steady. You were talking about our marriage, about our intimate life specifically. The color drained from her face instantly. She knew exactly which conversation I was referring to, and she knew she had been caught. I do not know what you think you heard, she started, but I held up my hand. I heard you call me pathetic in bed. I heard you say you have been faking it for 3 years. I heard you laugh about how I asked if it is good for you and you just lie and nod. Each sentence hit her like a physical blow. She opened her mouth several times, but no words came out. I also heard you say it would be easier to just deal with it rather than have an honest conversation with your husband, and I heard you wonder what it would be like to be with a real man. I did not mean any of that, she said quickly, her voice barely above a whisper. Which part did you not mean? The part where you call me pathetic? The part where you admitted to 3 years of lies? Or the part where you fantasized about other men? I was just venting. I was frustrated and I said things I did not mean. I nodded slowly. So when you told your sister you have been faking it for 3 years, that was just venting? Yes. No, I mean it is complicated. It is not complicated at all. Either you have been lying to me for 3 years or you were lying to your sister last week. Which is it? She could not answer because we both knew the truth. She had been lying to me and now she was trying to lie about the lying. I want to work on this, she said desperately. We can go to counseling. We can figure out how to make things better. You have had 3 years to work on this. Instead, you chose to lie to my face and mock me behind my back. I was trying to protect your feelings. No, I said firmly. You were protecting yourself from having a difficult conversation. There is a difference. She started crying then, the tears coming fast and heavy. Please do not throw away our marriage over this. We can fix it. I know we can. I watched her cry for a moment, feeling nothing but a strange sense of clarity. This woman had shown me exactly what she thought of me, and now she was upset that I had heard her truth. You are right, I said, standing up. We could probably fix this. We could go to counseling and work through your dishonesty and my inadequacy. We could spend months or years trying to rebuild trust you never should have broken. Hope flickered in her eyes. But I am not going to do that, I continued. Because I have too much respect for myself to stay with someone who thinks I am pathetic. I do not think you are pathetic, she said through her tears. You literally called me pathetic. Those were your exact words. I was angry about something else. I took it out on you unfairly. I looked at her for a long moment. This woman who had shared my bed for 6 years while lying about the most intimate part of our relationship. Pack a bag, I said quietly. You can stay at your sister's tonight. We will figure out the details later. You are kicking me out? This is my house too. You're right, it is. But I am not spending another night under the same roof as someone who has so little respect for me. Please, she begged. Give me a chance to make this right. I walked toward the door, then turned back to her one last time. You had your chance to make this right. It was every day for 3 years when you could have chosen honesty over deception. You made your choice then. Now I am making mine. 3 weeks later, I was sitting in my lawyer's office reviewing the divorce papers when my phone buzzed with another message from her. She had been trying to contact me daily since that night, alternating between apologies, promises to change, and attempts to make me feel guilty for giving up on our marriage. I deleted the message without reading it completely. There was nothing she could say that would change what had happened or how I felt about it. Everything looks good, my lawyer said, sliding the papers across his desk. She has agreed to all the terms, which honestly surprised me. Usually there is more fighting over assets. I was not surprised. She knew exactly why this was happening, and she knew she had no moral ground to stand on. Fighting me would mean having to explain to everyone why our marriage had ended, and that conversation would not reflect well on her. She wants to have a final conversation, he continued. Her lawyer mentioned it several times. Something about closure. There is nothing to discuss, I said, signing the documents. She had 6 years to have honest conversations with me. I am not interested in starting now. That evening, I was cleaning out the last of her belongings when I found the books she had left on her nightstand months ago. The relationship improvement guides that were supposed to fix what she saw as my deficiencies. I almost laughed at the irony. She had bought books to help me become better in bed, while never having the courage to tell me there was a problem in the first place. My phone rang as I was boxing up the books. Her sister's name appeared on the screen, and after a moment of consideration, I answered. She has been staying with me, she said without preamble. She is miserable. She barely eats, barely sleeps. I have never seen her like this. I am sorry to hear that, I said, and I meant it. I did not take pleasure in her suffering. She made a mistake. A terrible mistake. But she loves you. She has a funny way of showing love. She was scared to hurt your feelings. She thought she was protecting you. I set down the box and rubbed my temples. She was not protecting me. She was protecting herself from an uncomfortable conversation. And in the process, she turned our entire marriage into a lie. People make mistakes. They say things they do not mean when they are frustrated. She did not just say something she did not mean. She revealed what she actually thought about me. There is a difference. Her sister was quiet for a moment. What if she could prove to you that she has changed, that she has learned from this? How exactly would she prove that? By having honest conversations now that she has been caught lying? By suddenly finding me attractive now that I am leaving? It is too late for proof. She is talking about getting help, professional help. Good for her. She should get help, but she should get it for herself, not to win me back. You are really going to throw away 6 years over one conversation? That question had been bothering me for weeks, and I had finally found the answer. I am not throwing away 6 years. She threw them away 3 years ago when she decided our marriage was not worth her honesty. I'm just finally acknowledging what happened. After I hung up, I finished packing her things and loaded them into my car. I drove to her sister's house and left the boxes on the front porch with a note explaining what was inside. I did not ring the doorbell or try to see her. There was nothing left to say. On my way home, I stopped at the grocery store. As I was picking up milk, I noticed a woman in the next aisle struggling to reach something on a high shelf. Without thinking, I walked over and handed it to her. "Thank you," she said, smiling genuinely. "That was very kind." It was such a simple interaction, but it struck me how refreshing it was to have someone respond honestly to a gesture. No hidden meanings, no performance, just genuine appreciation for his simple kindness. 6 months later, I was having dinner with a friend when he asked if I missed being married. "I miss being married to someone who respected me," I said. "I do not miss being married to someone who saw me as a problem to be endured." "Do you think you will ever trust someone enough to try again?" I considered the question carefully. I will trust someone who shows me they are trustworthy through their actions, not just their words. Someone who has difficult conversations instead of avoiding them. Someone who sees partnership as honesty, not performance. That sounds like you have learned something valuable from all this. I learned that I would rather be alone than be with someone who sees me as pathetic. I learned that my self-respect is not negotiable. And I learned that sometimes the best thing you can do for yourself is walk away from people who do not value what you bring to their life. The divorce was finalized on a Tuesday morning. I walked out of the courthouse feeling lighter than I had in years. My phone buzzed with a message from her. One final attempt to reopen the conversation, but I did not read it. I simply blocked her number and drove home to start the next chapter of my life. That evening, I ran into a neighbor who asked about my wife. "We are divorced," I said simply. "I am sorry to hear that. These things are always complicated." "Actually," I said, "this one was pretty straightforward. She did not respect me, so I respected myself enough to leave. And for the first time in years, I meant every word I said." Our story has come to an end. If you have made it this far, how about subscribing to our channel? It helps us immensely. I have selected 2 other videos for you that I am sure you will enjoy. Feel free to click on them. I will be waiting for you in the next story. See you soon.